There was this really awkward moment between the Princess of Wales and Queen Camilla. Catherine was engaged in a
The
conversation.
camera does not lie. 40 million people watched the same footage. 40 million people saw the same few seconds. A public event, polished and precise, the kind of royal appearance that usually ends with waving hands and composed smiles. But something in those seconds made people stop scrolling. Something made them rewind, again and again. It was not what was said out loud. It was what the body said, without permission. Princess Charlotte of Wales, 9 years old, third in line to the British throne, stood in the frame. And in that same frame, Queen Camilla, the reigning Queen of the United Kingdom, did something. Royal watchers across the internet interpreted that moment as a boundary crossed. Comments filled up within hours. Hashtags formed before the event was even over. According to reports circulating across British and American media platforms, the exchange between Queen Camilla and Princess Charlotte struck observers as cold, dismissive, and deeply out of place for a child in a public setting. The palace said nothing. That silence would cost them. Here is what almost everyone missed. While the public focused entirely on Queen Camilla's alleged behaviour and Catherine's visible reaction, the person making the most consequential move in that room was not the Queen. It was not even Catherine, Princess of Wales. The person reshaping the board in real time was Prince William, Prince of Wales, standing just far enough away to see everything clearly and close enough to understand exactly what had just changed. Hi viewers, if you were standing in that room and you saw someone say something cold to your child in front of the entire world, what would your very first move be? Would you speak up immediately or wait and strike smarter? Drop your answer in the comments right now. This is the detail that changes the entire story. Royal analysts and biographers who study the interior mechanics of the British monarchy have long noted that the Wales family operates differently from the wider royal institution. Prince William does not respond to pressure the way his predecessors did. He does not reach for a public statement. He does not call a press conference. According to sources familiar with palace dynamics, William's response to any threat against his family is structural, quiet, precise. He rearranges things. So while 40 million people were debating whether Queen Camilla had behaved poorly toward Princess Charlotte, William was already 3 moves ahead. The rumour became the trigger. But the trigger was not the story. The story was what came after. And the person everyone thought was simply a worried father watching from the side was, according to royal insiders and commentators who study palace power shifts, already drawing the outline of a new boundary, one that Queen Camilla, King Charles III, and the entire old court would eventually feel, not through confrontation, not through a leaked statement, but through the slow, undeniable rearrangement of access, presence, and control over the 3 children who represent the monarchy's entire emotional future. The clip lasted 6 seconds. The consequences are still unfolding. Because in the royal family, the move that looks like a reaction is almost never the real move. The real move is the one nobody films. She is 9 years old, and she already carries the weight of history on her shoulders. Princess Charlotte of Wales is not simply the middle child of Prince William and Catherine, Princess of Wales. She is third in line to the British throne, positioned directly behind her father, William, Prince of Wales, and her elder brother, Prince George of Wales. That placement alone makes her one of the most symbolically significant children in the entire Western world. And what happened at that public event did not happen to an ordinary 9-year-old. It happened to a future pillar of the British monarchy. To understand why that matters, you have to understand how differently Princess Charlotte's position exists compared to royal children even 20 years ago. Before the succession to the Crown Act of 2013, A younger brother could legally leap over an older sister in the line of succession simply because of gender. That rule, ancient and deeply unfair by modern standards, meant daughters were structurally disposable in royal terms. The 2013 Act erased that. Under current British law, Princess Charlotte holds her place in the line, regardless of the gender of any sibling born after her. Prince Louis of Wales, born 2 years after Charlotte.
Thank you all for zooming in to join Catherine and I today at the start of Children's Hospice Week. I was going to start.
Does not displace her. She holds third, permanently. That is not ceremonial. That is constitutional law. So when royal watchers interpreted a public moment as Queen Camilla making Princess Charlotte feel small, they were not reacting to a personal family moment. They were reacting to something that touched the legal and symbolic architecture of the British state. Catherine, Princess of Wales, understood this before the footage finished playing. The emotional layer for Catherine is not complicated to read. Every credible biographer who has studied her years inside the royal institution, including writers like Robert Lacey and Katie Nicholl, has noted that Catherine's defining characteristic is not glamour or composure. It is discipline, combined with fierce maternal protectiveness. She has absorbed public criticism without breaking. She endured years of adjustment inside the palace machine without complaint. But her children are a different calculation entirely. A mother can train herself to absorb insults directed at her. That training does not transfer to her daughter. And the political layer beneath the emotional one is where Prince William becomes the central figure. William has spent years positioning the Wales family as the modern face of the monarchy. Every controlled appearance, every carefully selected public engagement, every deliberate image of George, Charlotte, and Louis laughing at a sporting event, those are not accidents. They are the product of a communication strategy built around emotional relatability. The Wales children are the monarchy's proof that the institution can feel human. The moment that proof is threatened, the entire investment is threatened. According to royal commentators who follow palace strategy closely, an institution as image-dependent as the British monarchy cannot afford even the rumour that a senior royal treated a future queen consort coldly in a public setting. The optics alone are damaging. Combined with a social media environment that turns 6 seconds of footage into 6 days of debate, the damage compounds fast. Charlotte did not ask to carry any of this. She is 9. But the board she stands on is real, and the people playing on it are not always thinking about the child first. That gap between what Charlotte deserves and what the palace machine requires is exactly where this story gets dangerous. Queen Camilla did not arrive at her position easily, and anyone who forgets that is not paying attention. The woman who now sits beside King Charles III at every state occasion, who wears the crown jewels at formal dinners, who is addressed as Her Majesty in every official capacity, spent decades being one of the most publicly disliked figures in British royal history. That is not opinion. That is documented. Polls from the early 2000s showed her approval ratings in single digits across the United Kingdom. She was framed, fairly or unfairly, as the woman who damaged the marriage of Prince Charles and Princess Diana. The public did not forgive that quickly. Some never did. What Camilla did with that judgment was absorb it, outlast it, and build a quiet, durable presence inside the institution. She did not crumble under media pressure. She did not retreat permanently into private life. She continued showing up. She supported Charles. She performed her duties. Over years, according to royal commentators, including Angela Levin, who wrote extensively about Camilla's transformation in public standing, she managed to shift public opinion enough to be accepted, if not universally loved. That took discipline. That took patience. that took a very specific understanding of how the royal institution values endurance over emotion. And that understanding, shaped by survival, shaped by years of navigating Diana's shadow and the public's grief, is precisely what makes the alleged exchange with Princess Charlotte so complicated to read. Camilla comes from the old court, not old in age alone, but old in practice. The version of royal life she learned, the one she lived through during the decades when Charles was still Prince of Wales and she was still a figure on the margins, was structured around rank, protocol, emotional restraint, and hierarchy above all. In that world, a senior royal correcting a junior royal, even a child, was not cruelty, it was instruction. It was the institution reproducing its own values through repetition, through expectation, through the quiet transmission of what was considered proper behaviour. Royal biographers have long debated whether that model of royal childhood, defined by discipline delivered from above, ever produced emotionally healthy adults. The record is complicated, but the model existed. It was normal. And Camilla lived through it. So when royal watchers interpreted her alleged interaction with Princess Charlotte as cold or dismissive, it is entirely possible and important to say clearly that there is no official confirmation of any wrongdoing. It is entirely possible that from Camilla's perspective, she was doing nothing wrong. She may have believed she was maintaining the decorum of the institution. She may have seen a child behaving in a way she considered unsuitable for the occasion. She may have applied the same standard she was held to herself, without pausing to consider that Catherine and William have deliberately chosen a different standard for their children. That is not a defence. That is a diagnosis. Because the real tension in this story is not whether Queen Camilla intended harm. The real tension is that her instinct and Catherine's instinct for what a royal child deserves are fundamentally different. And when those two instincts collided in a public space, the result was not just a family moment, it was a signal. Catherine's face in the footage was not the final reaction, it was the first one. Catherine did not raise her voice. She did not need to. Anyone who has watched Catherine, Princess of Wales, move through the last decade of public royal life knows that her danger is never in the volume, it is in the stillness. The composure she carries in public is not passivity. It is precision, and the moment the footage registered on her face, something shifted in that composure, not enough for a casual viewer to name it, enough for anyone paying close attention to understand that a line had been crossed. Royal-style analysts and body language commentators who reviewed the clip noted a specific tightening, a very controlled recentering of her posture, the kind of physical adjustment that people make when they are managing a response they have decided not to show publicly. According to observers who study her public appearances closely, Catherine has spent years training that response. She learned early in her royal life that the camera records everything and that emotion displayed without intention becomes a headline. So she manages, she disciplines herself, she breathes and holds, but she also remembers. There is a distinction that every parent understands on a cellular level. The insults a person absorbs for themselves and the moments they witness against their child are processed in completely different parts of who they are. Catherine has absorbed press criticism, wardrobe commentary, comparison with Diana, comparison with Meghan, Duchess of Sussex, and years of public scrutiny that would have destroyed a less resolute person. She processed all of it. She continued. She smiled at the cameras. Princess Charlotte is not Catherine's public image. Princess Charlotte is her daughter. According to people familiar with Catherine's approach to motherhood, a picture that has been built across years of careful press access and deliberate public moments, She has worked consciously to protect her children from the weight of royal expectation. She and Prince William have repeatedly made choices that prioritise the emotional development of George, Charlotte, and Louis over institutional optics. The children attend a school chosen partly for its normalcy. The family takes holidays that look genuinely relaxed. The image is constructed, yes, but the values behind it, according to biographers including Robert Lacey in his updated royal reporting, appear to be sincere. So when royal watchers interpreted the moment involving Queen Camilla and Princess Charlotte as an emotional breach, Catherine's reaction was not theatre. It was a mother who had spent years building a specific kind of childhood. For her daughter watching something old and cold reach into that work without permission. She did not confront the room. She did not make a scene. She did not give the cameras a headline moment they could run on a loop for a week. She communicated what had changed in the only language the palace truly understands. Silence, followed by action. Because in the royal institution, a quiet decision made behind closed doors rearranges more than any public statement ever could. Catherine turned, and the look she exchanged with Prince William, Prince of Wales, in that moment, according to royal watchers who passed the footage frame by frame, said everything that would never be said out loud. William understood immediately. He had been watching the board for a long time, and what he saw in that moment was not just his wife's anger. He saw a test of what kind of king he intended to be. The answer was already forming before they left the room. William did not move toward Queen Camilla. That is the detail most people missed completely. Every instinct in a room like that pushes toward reaction. A public event, a visible moment, an emotional wife, a child who had just experienced something that her parents considered unacceptable. Every instinct says confront, address it, make it known that the line exists. But Prince William, Prince of Wales, future King of the United Kingdom, did none of those things in public. He did something far more effective. He went quiet, and quiet, in palace terms, is the loudest signal there is. William has been studying the architecture of royal power for his entire life. He watched his mother, Diana, Princess of Wales, lose strategic ground by operating emotionally in public. He watched his father, then Prince Charles, spend decades in a slow institutional war that exhausted everyone around him. He absorbed both lessons. The monarchy does not respond well to public emotion from within. What it responds to is positional shift. Who appears where, who is included and who is not, whose children are visible and whose influence is permitted to reach them. So William began rearranging. According to royal commentators who track Wales family scheduling and access patterns, the changes that follow moments of internal palace tension are rarely announced. They emerge gradually in public calendars, in which events the Wales family attends together, in which senior royals share the same frame as the children of William and Catherine. The adjustments are quiet enough to deny and clear enough to read. Royal biographers have long noted that William's protective instinct over his children is not simply emotional, it is strategic. Prince George of Wales is the future king. Princess Charlotte of Wales is third in line. Prince Louis of Wales is part of the emotional architecture the public has built around this family. Collectively, these three children are not just William and Catherine's family. They are the monarchy's most important long-term asset. Every image of them at Christmas, at school, at Wimbledon builds public investment in the institution's future. Any shadow over any one of them weakens the entire position. William's calculation was not complicated. If Queen Camilla, in her role as reigning queen, believed she had the standing to correct or dismiss Princess Charlotte in a public space, that belief needed to be addressed, not through argument. not through confrontation that would require King Charles III to choose sides between his wife and his heir. But through the quiet, unmistakable message that the Wales children were not available for old court discipline. Access changed. The circle tightened. Staff who manage Wales family appearances, according to those familiar with palace operations, operate under increasingly precise instructions about which engagements involve the children, how long those engagements last, and who shares proximity with George, Charlotte, and Louis during public events. None of those instructions are published. None of them require a press release. They simply change the shape of what is possible. Camilla may believe the conflict is about respect for her position as Queen Consort elevated to Queen. William is not thinking about respect. He is thinking about the reign that comes after his father's. He is thinking about a monarchy that his children will inherit. He is building the frame for that monarchy right now, in the choices he makes about who gets close and who does not. King Charles III still wears the crown, but in the calculation that matters for the next 50 years, William had already moved his pieces into position, and no one in the palace had fully understood yet what the board now looked like. King Charles III was caught between two fires, and both of them were burning at the same time. On his left, Queen Camilla, his wife of nearly 2 decades, the woman he had chosen over everything, the woman the British public had taken years to accept, was now at the centre of a rumour that was moving faster than any palace communications team could contain. On his right, Prince William, Prince of Wales, his heir, the man who would carry the crown after him, was going quiet in the specific way that people who study palace dynamics know means something significant has shifted internally. Charles has lived long enough inside the institution to recognise that silence from William is not neutrality, it is pressure. This is not a new position for King Charles III. Royal historians and biographers, including Jonathan Dimbleby, who produced one of the most detailed accounts of Charles's interior life as a royal, have documented how Charles spent the majority of his life navigating impossible loyalty splits. He spent decades torn between institutional duty and personal desire. He spent years managing a marriage that fractured publicly in ways that permanently altered the monarchy's relationship with ordinary British people. He watched his sons grow into men shaped partly by the wounds that fracture left behind. He knows what unresolved tension inside the royal family costs. He has paid that bill personally. And now the bill was arriving again, in a different form, with different names on it. From a public relations standpoint, Charles's position in this moment is the most delicate of anyone involved. He cannot side openly with Camilla without appearing to dismiss his grandchildren's emotional experience and alienating William at a critical moment in the transition toward the next reign. He cannot side with William and Catherine without publicly undermining his own wife in a way that would undo years of carefully constructed acceptance of Camilla as queen. So Charles does what institutions do when they cannot afford to choose. He attempts to hold both sides together through managed silence and careful optics. But the palace is not operating in a quiet news cycle. According to reports circulating in the British press during this period, public interest in royal family finances had already reached a sharp peak. The sovereign grant, the mechanism through which British taxpayers fund the official duties of the monarchy, had come under renewed scrutiny in Parliament. For the 2023 to 2024 financial year, the sovereign grant stood at approximately £86.3 million, a figure derived from 15% of the Crown Estate's profits. That number, public and documented, was being debated loudly by members of Parliament who questioned whether the institution's cost matched its modern value. Buckingham Palace was simultaneously managing a renovation project estimated at over £369 million, funded through a separate reserved portion of the sovereign grant. The optics of a palace renovation running alongside questions about royal behaviour toward children created a specific kind of media combustion that communications professionals describe as a multiplier effect. Every news story connects to every existing pressure point. Charles understood the compounding risk. A family rumour in any other context stays a family rumour. Inside a monarchy, already fielding questions about cost, relevance, and emotional modernity, it becomes a referendum on the entire institution. He needed the story to stop moving, and the one person who controlled whether it stopped or accelerated was standing quietly in the room, rearranging the chess pieces while everyone else was still debating the opening move. The money was already in the headlines before the rumour about Princess Charlotte ever reached the internet. And that timing, that specific collision between royal family tension and royal family finances, is what transformed a 6-second clip from a public event into something that financial commentators, royal analysts, and public trust researchers were all discussing simultaneously. It was not planned that way. But in media dynamics, the stories that hit hardest are almost never the ones that were designed. They are the ones that arrive when 3 separate pressure systems collide at the same moment. Here is what was already in the public record. The Crown Estate, the vast portfolio of properties and assets managed on behalf of the British state, but historically linked to the monarchy's public funding, reported a net revenue profit of approximately £1.1 billion for the financial year ending March 2024. That figure represented a dramatic increase, driven largely by offshore wind energy leasing rights. The Crown Estate holds the rights to the seabed around England, Wales, and Northern Ireland, and as offshore wind development accelerated across British waters, the income generated by those leasing agreements surged in ways that dramatically inflated the Crown Estate's total valuation. This is publicly documented. It is not rumour, but the political conversation around it carries significant tension. Because the sovereign grant is calculated as a percentage of Crown Estate profits, a dramatic increase in those profits means a dramatic increase in what the taxpayer-connected mechanism delivers to fund royal duties. Royal finance analysts, including those writing for publications like The Guardian and the Financial Times, noted that this connection between offshore wind revenue and royal public funding created a perception problem. The monarchy was not controlling offshore wind policy, but the optics of a royal institution benefiting financially from a booming energy sector, at the same time that British households were managing an energy cost crisis, landed badly in public conversation. From a public relations standpoint, this context made every royal story more flammable during this period. It was not a scandal in the legal sense. No laws were broken, no funds were misappropriated. The sovereign grant mechanism is entirely transparent and entirely legal under the Sovereign Grant Act of 2011. But transparency does not automatically produce public comfort. What the public saw was an institution whose funding was growing, whose renovation costs were rising, and whose internal family dynamics were now generating footage that millions of people were interpreting as a senior royal treating a child poorly at a formal event. Sir Clive Alderton, Principal Private Secretary to the King, whose role involves managing the intersection of royal family dynamics and institutional communication, operates in precisely this kind of environment. His job, and the job of the wider palace communications apparatus, is to prevent individual stories from becoming institutional narratives. A rumour about one moment at one event is manageable. A rumour about one moment at one event, landing on top of a national conversation about whether the monarchy justifies its public cost, is a different kind of problem entirely. Vice Admiral Sir Tony Johnston Burt, the master of the household responsible for the operational management of royal residences and formal events, oversees the logistical environment in which these moments occur. The protocols, the seating, the positioning, the proximity of senior royals to the Wales children during formal occasions, these fall within the operational architecture that his office manages. According to reports from royal commentators familiar with palace operations, adjustments to those protocols, when they happen quietly and without formal announcement. But they happen, and when they do, everyone inside the institution understands what the adjustment means. James Chalmers, as Chief Executive of the Financial Conduct Authority, operates in a separate institutional lane, but his agency's ongoing work around financial transparency, offshore structures, and public trust in large institutions ran parallel in the public conversation during this period, adding another layer of institutional scrutiny to an environment already under pressure. What looked like a family rumour on a Tuesday morning had become, by Thursday afternoon, a thread that connected royal behaviour, royal finances, offshore energy profits, and public trust in the monarchy's modern relevance. Pull one thread and all the others moved. The palace thought managing the original rumour was the problem. They had not yet identified the larger one. The statement never came, and the silence said everything. Buckingham Palace's communications office, one of the most practiced crisis management operations in the world, made a decision that royal PR analysts have since described as a double-edged calculation. They did not issue a denial. They did not confirm. They did not arrange a carefully worded non-response through a trusted media intermediary. They simply held the line and waited for the news cycle to exhaust itself, the way it usually does. But this cycle did not exhaust itself. It fed. The modern royal media environment does not operate the way it did even 10 years ago. In the previous decade, palace silence could effectively kill a story, because the mainstream press had limited appetite for sustained coverage without new official information. That model no longer holds. According to media analysts who study royal coverage patterns, the rise of dedicated royal commentary channels across YouTube, TikTok, and Instagram has created a permanent parallel press corps that does not need palace confirmation to sustain a narrative. They need footage, interpretation, and audience emotion. The clip of Princess Charlotte and Queen Camilla provided all three indefinitely. Body language analysts posted frame-by-frame breakdowns. Former royal staff members gave interviews about protocol and emotional dynamics inside formal events. American audiences, who according to viewership data consume more royal content per capita than many British demographics, kept the story circulating long after the British press had moved on to other subjects. The clip crossed platforms. It reached audiences who had never followed royal news before. Every share extended the story's lifespan, and every day the palace said nothing. Catherine's supporters inside that online ecosystem filled the silence with their own verdict. The interpretation was consistent, and it was damaging. Queen Camilla had crossed a line with a child. The palace was protecting Camilla by staying quiet. William and Catherine were being forced to absorb another institutional betrayal in silence. None of that was confirmed. All of it was spreading. From a public relations standpoint, this created a structural trap. If the palace issued a denial, it handed the story a second week of oxygen by confirming that an official response was necessary. If the palace continued saying nothing, the audience-generated narrative hardened into assumption. Either path led to a worse position than the one the palace started in. Royal communications experts, who spoke to outlets covering the story, noted that the Wales family's specific brand, built around emotional authenticity and modern parenting values, made them the automatic emotional winner in any story framed around the protection of children. The audience was not evaluating evidence. The audience was evaluating feeling. And the feeling the footage produced was universal. A child looked uncomfortable. A parent's face showed strain. Everyone in the world understands that language, regardless of what country they live in. The institution's real problem was not Queen Camilla's reputation. It was not the rumour itself. It was that the old palace playbook, the one that says stay quiet and outlast the story, was written for a media world that no longer exists. And the Wales family, whether by design or instinct, had positioned themselves perfectly inside the new one. William did not need to brief a journalist. Catherine did not need to give an interview. Their silence read as dignity. The institution's silence read as protection of the wrong person. That asymmetry was not accidental. And the palace, according to insiders who track internal communications, was beginning to understand that William had not simply reacted to a moment, he had used it. The board had been rearranged, and the palace communications team was only now starting to map what the new positions looked like. What they found when they looked closely was not reassuring. The invitations began to change. Nobody announced it. Nobody explained it. But the people inside the palace system, who manage scheduling, who coordinate formal appearances, who arrange which members of the royal family stand where and for how long during official engagements, those people noticed. The Wales family's calendar was shifting. Appearances that would previously have placed Prince George of Wales, Princess Charlotte of Wales, and Prince Louis of Wales in shared formal settings with the wider senior royal family became less frequent. The occasions that remained were more tightly structured, shorter in duration, and more precisely supervised. According to royal commentators, who track Wales family public appearances across formal royal occasions, the pattern that emerged in the months following the public event was consistent with what palace insiders describe as a controlled withdrawal. Not a boycott, not a public dispute. A quiet, methodical reduction of unstructured access to the Wales children during formal institutional settings. This is how William operates. This is what the chessboard looks like when he has made a decision. He did not remove his children from public life. That would generate the exact kind of press coverage he was working to avoid. He removed the conditions that created the vulnerability. Every public appearance featuring George, Charlotte, and Louis was now more precisely choreographed. The buffer between the children and the wider royal family during formal occasions was not visible to a casual observer. But it was real, and everyone inside the institution could feel it. Catherine's role in the shift was not passive. According to people familiar with how the Wales household operates, Catherine carries significant operational influence over decisions involving the children's public schedule. The image of her as simply a supportive spouse, standing beside William, understates how much of the family's strategic positioning flows from her judgment. She sees the long arc. She understands what each public moment builds or erodes in terms of public emotional investment in her children. If the alleged interaction with Queen Camilla had reached Princess Charlotte in any lasting way, Catherine's response was to make certain the environment around Charlotte going forward left no room for repetition. Not through anger, through architecture. Prince George's role in this shift is worth noting. As the future king, George carries his own institutional weight. His proximity to his sister and brother during public events is not casual family closeness. It is part of how William and Catherine have deliberately built the Wales children's collective image as a unit. They appear together. They support each other visibly. The public reads them as a family that genuinely likes each other, which is rarer in royal history than most people realise, and that reading builds long-term loyalty to the institution far more effectively than any formal ceremony ever could. Prince Louis, the youngest, remains the public's most emotionally open window into the Wales family. His unscripted expressions at public events have generated some of the most widely shared images of any royal family member in recent memory. His presence is strategic in its apparent lack of strategy. He makes the Wales family look real. Protecting all three of them from anything that disrupts that realness is not just Catherine's maternal instinct. It is William's long-term reign strategy. Every year those children grow into increasingly confident public figures is a year the future monarchy strengthens its emotional foundation. The old court, the one Camilla represents, the one that operated through hierarchy and emotional restraint, did not build that kind of public loyalty. It commanded respect through formality and distance. The Wales family is building something different. Something that the next 50 years of the monarchy will depend on entirely, and by the time the palace fully registered the shift in the Wales family's positioning, the window for easy correction had already closed. The board did not look the way it had 6 weeks earlier, and the person who had redesigned it had done so without raising his voice once. In the end, no apology was issued, no statement was released. No formal meeting was ever confirmed. The rumour that started with 6 seconds of footage at a public royal event never produced a palace confirmation, a legal action, a named source willing to go on record, or a private conversation that anyone officially acknowledged. What it produced was something the palace cannot legislate against and cannot spin away. It produced a shift. And shifts, once they settle into place inside an institution as old and as rigid as the British monarchy, are almost impossible to reverse without everyone in the building knowing exactly what happened and why. Here is what the story actually taught. Read carefully, because this is the part that changes how you watch every royal story going forward. Everyone entered this story asking the wrong question. The question everyone asked was whether Queen Camilla had behaved poorly toward Princess Charlotte of Wales. That question generated the clicks. That question filled the comment sections. That question drove the body language videos, and the Royal Watcher debates, and the American morning show segments. But that was never the real question. The real question was who controls the emotional future of the British monarchy, and that question has already been answered. Not in a courtroom, not in a palace press release. In the quiet, cumulative weight of 1,000 small decisions made by Prince William, Prince of Wales, and Catherine, Princess of Wales, over years of deliberate, precise, patient work. Catherine's lesson in this story is not rage, it is resolve. She did not perform her anger for the cameras. She channeled it into structure, into the architecture of protection she built around her daughter, around all 3 of her children. A mother who operates with that kind of discipline, inside an institution that historically eats mothers alive, is not someone the palace should ever mistake for manageable. William's lesson is not victory, it is vision. He did not defeat Queen Camilla. He did not humiliate King Charles III. He simply made visible, through the quietest possible methods, that the Wales family is no longer subject to the old court's emotional logic. The future of the monarchy does not live in Buckingham Palace's formal traditions. It lives in the faces of 3 children who are growing up knowing their parents draw a line and hold it. King Charles III's lesson is the most painful one. He has spent his entire life trying to modernize an institution that resists modernization, while simultaneously trying to protect the people inside it from each other. He cannot protect everyone. The crown weighs exactly what it weighs, and the air beneath him has already decided what kind of king he intends to be. Queen Camilla's lesson is about the limits of rank. In the old model of royal authority, position determined power. The Queen's word carried above all others by structural default. But emotional authority does not work that way. It is not assigned by title. It is built over time through the choices a person makes in moments no one is supposed to be watching. The public watched, and the public decided. Princess Charlotte does not know the full shape of what her parents built around her in response to one uncomfortable moment at one public event. She is 9. She is third in line to the throne. She has her whole life ahead of her, and the adults who love her most have already made sure the path forward is cleaner than the one that came before. In the royal family, the move that changes everything is never the loudest one. It is the one made quietly, deliberately, while the cameras are all pointed somewhere else. The board has changed. The players are in new positions. And the game that will define the British monarchy for the next half-century has already begun. If this story revealed something about how power really moves inside the world's most watched family, share it with someone who needs to see it. Subscribe to this channel and turn on notifications so you never miss a story that pulls back the curtain on the hidden dynamics shaping the institutions that shape our world. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Your perspective matters, and this community is built on people who think deeper than the headline. See you in the next one.